Good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody into this morning's webinar where we're going to spend some time looking at building repair orders and estimates using Smart eCat and Smart Jobs. What that really encompasses is three separate topics. There's really three ways that we can add items onto a transaction by using the Smart eCat and or Smart Job catalog, and we'll look at each one individually. We're going to start with looking at using Smart Jobs and how those function and behave and some of our options there. And we'll talk about using what we call the category search through Smart eCat to add jobs onto transactions. Last but not least, we'll use the search functionality in order for us to go ahead and find individual parts and or labor items, and again, add those back onto our transactions. I'm going to start with my customer Jennifer Quinn down here in my work in progress with her 2011 Chevy Malibu, and we'll start out relatively basic. We're going to do some Smart Jobs here, and Smart Jobs are really designed for jobs that are done with some degree of frequency. So meaning something like an oil change, maybe a simple brake job, maybe a wheel alignment, something that you're going to do time and again, and you're going to want to make sure is executed consistently regardless of who's actually standing behind the counter adding the job onto the transaction. I always want to make sure when we do this job we include A, B, and C. We consider labor items X, Y, and Z. We look at part items D, E, and F, if you will. So I'm going to go to a Smart Job here in the upper left-hand corner of my estimate for Jennifer Quinn. It launches me out to my Smart eCat catalog. There's two really entry points into Smart eCat, starting with Smart eJobs that we just clicked on inside of our estimate window, and or the Smart eCat in the upper left-hand corner. Either will take us to the same Smart eCat catalog function. There is one subtle difference between the behavior of the two. I'll explain that as we get into some of our catalog and or individual part searches. However, both take us out to the exact same place. The primary difference between the two is the landing space, meaning if you look at when I clicked on the Smart eJobs in the upper left-hand corner, we land on the Smart eJob tab here inside of my Smart eCat catalog, where I can go in and tell the system that category of work we're looking to perform. In this case, is just going to be my standard list of oil changes. If I looked at the list of jobs I've configured, we'll first look for the oil viscosity, find out whether it's 520, 530, 1030. Those are the weights of oil I carry in a standard weight. I've also got a special that I run occasionally at $19.99 I've got listed there. And I have jobs to add on additional quarts of oil. So once we get beyond my 5-quart delta of what's included in my base oil change, we'd use those to go ahead and add additional oil onto a transaction. In our case, we're going to start out by looking to see exactly what viscosity of oil would fit that 2011 Chevy Malibu. So the very first line in my list says oil viscosity. Anytime we do a Smart Job, Smart Job says, well, based upon the way it's configured, here are the tasks it has to perform. In this case, the only thing it's going to look for is the viscosity in the Epicor catalog, which is what we're using as the baseline information for Smart eCat. Specifications are listed as parts. So even though it says we're looking for catalog parts, we're not really looking for anything that we're going to add onto this, just a reference to know what viscosity of oil will fit this vehicle. What I'll ask you to pay attention to is it's with the tabs in the upper left-hand corner. The tab that we're currently on is my Smart eJob tab. When I want to execute and actually start looking up the different pieces of this job, at the bottom of this window, I will click on Go. We move from our Smart eJob tab to what's called our Catalog tab, where it now goes out and looks to see, well, what is the recommended viscosity for a 2011 Chevy Malibu? And in this case, what we have listed is the recommended viscosity is 5W30. If we're going to drive the vehicle below -20 degrees Fahrenheit, then 030 would be the applicable weight of oil. Seeing as I don't live at the Arctic Circle, we're going to go with 5W30 as my base weight of oil for that 2011 Chevy Malibu. I want to go back now and add on that oil change to her transaction. So I'm just going to click back to the upper left-hand corner and go back to my Smart eJob tab where we started and selected our oil viscosity job. In this case, 5W30, the appropriate weight of oil. So I'll grab 5W30 from my list and now some additional tasks to perform as we go through this Smart Job. Most notably, we're going to include 5W30 oil that is added by default anytime we add this job. When you see other parts, it means they're not coming from the catalog. Those are just items from my local inventory that are going to get added onto the transaction whenever I perform this. So in this case, oil, maybe it's coolant with a water pump, maybe it's trans fluid with a trans flush, or whatever other example you'd like to include. But this is saying anytime I do this job, we're going to include this element. The catalog part says, well, these are going to be variable based upon the vehicle. So I'm going to go search the catalog for, in this case, a specification, my capacity. Let's see how many quarts of oil go into that 2011 Chevy Malibu, and then also my oil filter, because I need to know exactly which one fits that particular vehicle. Again, the impetus to go ahead and go through these tasks is the Go button down here at the bottom of this window. So I'll click on Go. As I do, it takes me out and it shows me 5 quarts of oil is my base capacity. I'll check that box on the left-hand side. I want to bring that forward so it prints on my documents, not only when I present them to a technician, but also back to the consumer, so they know what the capacity of their vehicle that we filled to was, whether it was 3.5, 5, or 8. We want to include that as a reference so that we know exactly how many quarts of oil go into that piece. I'll hit Next in the upper right-hand corner. When I click on Next, it says, well, step 1 of this job was to find the capacity. Step 2 is to go out and find the filter. So as I'm looking through the list here, you'll notice that in my local inventory, I carry Napa's Pro Select line of filtration. And in fact, in this case, I buy these by the case, so I get the master pack of that 27082. As we look at this window here, what it tells us is not only the description, line code, part number. Here is my cost. Because this is an in-stock item, my list and my sell are based upon my retail price, or what we call price 1, back on the our writer side. I've got 16 of them in stock versus 2 other that I've carried over the course of time, not currently in stock, and 1 part number down here where it says catalog, where there is no part reference in my master inventory. So the difference really between the two is if it says stock, it means that that part number exists in my master inventory and will be followed by my current on-hand quantity. If it just says catalog, it says, well, I looked for the Balcamp line of filtration products in your master inventory, found no match. So again, probably not something I've ever stocked in my local inventory. With Smart eCat, as we're working our way looking for parts, we have the ability to either have it show us all parts and or just the parts that are available, meaning there's a button up here at the top that says Hide Unavailable. If I click on that, it filters out the 3 other parts that potentially could have been in my local inventory and just shows me the ones that are actually physically available. So that's the one that I'd like to add to this ticket for our customer with the 2011 Chevy Malibu. I put a check mark in the box on the left-hand side in the upper right-hand corner. I'll go ahead and click on Next. I'm going to add that job back onto the ticket. So on the right-hand side, my options are Exit, Post, or Post and Exit. The difference between the 3 is if I click on Exit, it leaves the catalog. It discards any parts, labor, and or specifications I may have selected and takes us back over to our transaction. If I click on Post, it adds the job to the ticket, creates the oil change with the oil and the filter as well as the specification, in this case the capacity, but leaves me in the catalog. So if I had additional jobs to add, save me the step of leaving the catalog and coming back in. In our case, we're going to hit Post/Exit on the right-hand side. Take us out of the catalog, back over to the transaction or the work in progress ticket for Jennifer Quinn, where we now have that 530 oil change with both the oil and the filter included. A couple of things before we get back out to our catalog. The first is the capacity on this was 5 quarts of oil. We looked that up so that we would make sure we knew exactly what that fit. If I was to double click on this labor description, it appends those specifications to the back end of my labor description. So even though they're stored in the Epicor catalog, or we search for them in the Epicor catalog as parts, as we translate them back over to our transaction in our writer, they get moved from a part and then appended as a note to the back end of the labor description. So it is 5 quarts of oil, which includes the filter capacity. That's the spec we grabbed from the Epicor catalog. The 5 quarts of oil is my default. Just happens to be a coincidence that's what this vehicle takes, but this number does not change dynamically based upon whether we picked 5 quarts, 3.5 quarts, or 8. It just knows that this is by default what is included as part of this service. So again, we've got our oil change with our capacity listed, and then again, if I needed to charge for additional oils or needed to change the quantity to something lesser, I can do that by just using either my additional oil jobs or just changing the quantity if it was going down from 5 that was associated with that existing package. So just a basic oil change we've added using smart jobs. I want to do a couple of more smart jobs before we leave that as a topic and move over to some of our other catalog searches. Coming back in here, the oil change and the oil viscosity was job number 1. We also want to add a tire rotation onto this transaction. If I was to scroll down through my list, again, this is my list of defined categories. They are user definable. Make them, add them, change them to your heart's desire. Down towards the bottom, I've got one for tire services. Under my tire service listing, I have a handful of different items, including the very first one in my list that says tire rotation. $19.99 is the package price for that tire rotation, and when I do that, the only thing I'm going to look up is my lug nut torque specifications. A smart job doesn't have to use book time labor. It doesn't have to source parts from the catalog. In this case, I just want to add a line that says I'm going to charge the customer $19.99 for performing that tire rotation, and then we're also going to check the lug nut torque. Click on Go, and it's going to, again, much like it did with the viscosity and or the capacity, sort that specification from the Epicor catalog. When I hit Next in the upper right-hand corner, now I want to drop that back onto the ticket, but I do have one more job that I like to perform. So on the right-hand side, as opposed to Post and Exit, I'll click on Post. And as I described before, the behavior of the Post icon says drop the job back on the ticket and let me go back over to my catalog search. So if I wanted to do another job in another category, let's do a brake front disc, and we'll do install pads, calipers, and rotors. I can switch without exiting the catalog and coming back in. This one has a little bit more to do, at least in terms of the number of items it's got listed. We're going to look up some parts. We're going to look up some book time labor. We're also going to look up the labor to, we're going to add a labor job to bleed the brake hydraulic system. Much like other parts was indicative of, here is a part that we're going to use with this job whenever it's performed. Other labor says this is a labor operation or a labor job that we're going to perform every time we perform a specific job. So in this case, anytime I'm doing a caliper service, I want to have it add that brake bleed, make sure I'm not forgetting to charge for that particular service. I went ahead and checked that box briefly in my previous example, didn't explain why. There's these boxes down the left-hand side of our smart job listing. The purpose of the boxes is to select and or deselect the items that we don't want included as part of this job. For example, my technician hasn't recommended or didn't say we needed a wheel seal. So I'll just click on that box. When I do that, it turns it to a red X, which indicates that we're going to skip that particular element. So this time, this customer, this vehicle, this invoice, we're going to skip adding the wheel seal, or at least searching the catalog for the wheel seal, not a recommended or necessary component of the work being performed. So I can turn those on and or off per se if I wanted to select the items we're looking for and then hit go at the bottom of this window. A few more things to do this time, starting with, well, we're looking for some calipers, and for the first time I've got a part that doesn't exist or isn't available in my local inventory. As we're looking through my list, I have 4 primary vendors, Napa, CarQuest, Advance, and O'Reilly that I use. And in that list, you'll notice 2 of them came back in with the backgrounds on their icons in green, 2 of them with the backgrounds on the icons in red. As we look at each of these icons here, there's actually 2 different messages it's telling us. The green check mark that's there tells us that we sent the message to Napa. That's all it tells us, is that when I'm looking for a water pump, I asked Napa, calipers, I apologize. I asked Napa, do you have calipers? That's all it says, is we asked the question. The background, red versus green, indicates that they answered the question, and here was the answer. Meaning the green background says that they have parts available, be it at the local store or, in this case, looking at the availability column, in the distribution center. The green check from CarQuest, the green background from CarQuest tells us that they have parts available, in their case, coming from my local CarQuest, which happens to be called Test Independent. The red background tells us that they don't have any parts available. We asked Advance, and they said no. So whether it's at the local Advance, a hub store, or through their DC, again, it's telling us they don't have those parts available. Same with O'Reilly. Nothing at least available at the current moment in time. Going back to CarQuest, we'll grab the ones, the left and the right, coming from our local CarQuest store, and in the upper right-hand corner, we'll click on Next. A bit more extensive in my selection this time because the next thing it wants is the brake pads, which I'll typically buy from Napa as part of their safety stop line. So as long as they're available at the local store, that will be my selection. I'll check the box and hit Next in the upper right-hand corner. Same thing with rotors, the NB line from Napa. Now that's coming from the DC, so if I want them from Napa right now, $83.78 for the Ultra Premium would be my price tag. If I wanted to see if there was something a bit cheaper, O'Reilly's got them at my hub store, so probably my delivery time better than from the DC at Napa, so that may be the most efficient means for me to get those rotors for that particular vehicle. I'll check the box, hit Next in the upper right-hand corner, where the last thing it's going to want me to find, at least based on the way I have the job configured, is a hardware kit. Now, I didn't make a note or point it out as we went through, but the safety stop line of friction from Napa contains a hardware kit. So therefore, don't need one as part of this particular transaction. Just because we've arrived at the window doesn't mean we need to select anything. In the upper right-hand corner, I'll just click on Next, and it will take me through. Where for the first time, it's now asking me to look up the labor. And in this case, it's showing me the labor for the brake pads. Now, as I'm looking at this list here, it says 1 hour to do both sides on the front. Now, if we're going to correct the disc rotor, overhaul the caliper, or if we continue to scroll down, you'll see there is the option if we're going to replace the caliper, 7/10 of an hour is the labor time we should add per side. So if I checked that box and then came over here, I can change my quantity from 1 to 2 because I want left and right. And after I've changed that quantity, I need to click anywhere off of that particular value, meaning click into this yellow space here. It now locks that value in. As I click on Next in the upper right-hand corner, it takes me to what's called my Posted Parts and Labor tab, where I see that I'm getting the calipers from CarQuest, I'm getting the pads from Napa, I'm getting the rotors from O'Reilly. If I was to look at the Labor tab, it's telling me that 1 hour to do the pads and then replacing the caliper 2 times 0.7 or 2.4 as a total time, multiplied times my base labor rate of 85 and then using my smart labor pricing, 216.24. I'll hit Post and Exit on the right-hand side, and what it's going to do is it's going to drop not only the tire rotation, the brake pads, but also my brake bleed back onto my transaction, along with all of the different parts that we had associated with this particular job. So the calipers, the pads, and the rotors come across. If I had the approval to do that, my next process from here would be to go back and submit the order to my vendor. I'll do that using a function called Smart eOrder over on the left-hand side. When I click on Smart eOrder, it looks at the transaction we're currently in this case, the repair order for Jennifer Quinn, to find that we need to order these parts from CarQuest, these from O'Reilly, and these from Napa. To submit the order to the vendor, all I do is I click on the truck. When I click on the truck, if I can send a message, it will give me an order message box, and then it uses the invoice number assigned as the PO number with the R as a prefix for repair order. I'm going to click on OK, and my visual cue that these parts have been ordered is this checkbox over here on the right-hand side. That checkbox coming back is my confirmation that those parts have been placed on order. At this point, my only way to leave this window is to hit Post and Exit on the right-hand side. As I hit Post and Exit, well, we didn't order the parts from Napa. We also didn't order the parts from O'Reilly. If I go back out to Smart eOrder, what it will allow me to do is to just go back now and order the parts that have not yet been previously submitted through Smart eOrder and or where the current on-hand quantity isn't sufficient. Again, notice my oil filter and or my quarts of oil not appearing in my Smart eOrder window. I'd go through the same exercise, click the truck, click OK. In Napa's case, their POS system doesn't support receipt of a message, so therefore not available to send, and I'll just click on OK. The truck and then OK for O'Reilly as well, and O'Reilly is going to let me confirm the order. I'll hit Post and Exit to get out of my window here, back over to my transaction, and now I've got all of my parts on order for Jennifer Quinn. So a couple of other nuances there as far as that's concerned, but starting with Smart Jobs as our means to go ahead and build that job for that transaction. I'm going to leave Jennifer Quinn as I started out this morning. I said there were 3 different ways that we wanted to explore to add items or add jobs onto transactions inside of our writer. The second place we're going to go is using what we call a category search. I'm going to bring up Kathy Parker here with her Honda Accord, which she brought in for both the charging and starting test, as well as we're going to pressure test the cooling system. So as we've gone through, the first job we want to add on is the job to remove and replace the battery. Now I said there was a subtle difference between this entry point and this entry point. The biggest difference that you'll notice first off is as I click on Smart eCat in the upper left hand corner, it's going to take me out and it's going to take me into my Smart eCat catalog. However, it starts on the catalog tab, not the Smart eJob tab. Essentially, it's using this categories search by default as opposed to using the Smart Jobs search. In my example, so we're going to do a battery replacement. So my category is going to be battery replacement. On the right-hand side, there is one subcategory and one sub-labor category underneath that battery replacement job. I'm going to double-click on battery cables as it brings this window up here. Again, what it's searching for is the category is battery replacement, the parts battery and cables is the subcategory, and we haven't yet gone to a labor subcategory. As I'm looking, I've got the parts from Napa all coming from the distribution center. CarQuest also has some available. In this case, there's a 60-month battery and my local CarQuest that we may decide we want to choose. I'll put a check mark in the box on the right-hand side. Now in this case, as we do the category search, I want both the parts and the labor. So after I've checked the box, all I have to do is come over to my drop-down box where it says labor, change the category from select down to battery, cable, and wiring. Now it tells me if we're just doing the main battery and not the hybrid, 7/10 of an hour would be the labor time to remove and replace. I check the box there. The last thing I'm going to do is in the upper right-hand corner, I'll click on Next. We often get asked, well, what about Post? What Post does is it takes whatever is currently checked and it adds it into what we call our Posted Parts and Labor tab, for lack of a better term, a shopping cart. I didn't hit the post icon as I switched from parts to labor because when I make that switch, it automatically posts it for me. There's one example of an opportunity where you have to hit the post icon, and that's when we do a search, which we'll come back and do here a little bit later on, but not necessary to hit the post the majority of the time. But anytime you do, there's no harm. It just says whatever is sitting here checked, we're going to drop that into my shopping cart, into my Posted Parts and Labor tab. In this case, having found both parts and labor, I'll click Next, and now it takes me into my Posted Parts and Labor tab. Again, to my example, there's my part that I grabbed. Even though I hadn't hit Post at any point in time, it still came across to my Posted Parts and Labor tab. Not being in a Smart Job changes the behavior of this window a bit in that, to the upper right-hand corner, this window is now available. Now, I didn't point it out when we did the Smart Job, but we could have always assigned a technician if we knew who was going to perform the job. Whether it's a Smart Job or a category search, we could always assign a technician. What's new and or different is the section down here where it says we're going to post the parts and labor to a new job. It knows, based upon the labor category that was selected from Epicor, that starting and charging is the appropriate place to put this particular job. However, it comes up with a generic description, and that's based upon my pre-configured setting. And in that generic description, it just says electrical labor. That's perfectly fine because what we're going to do down here towards the bottom where it says labor options is we're going to replace the predefined description. What that really means is if I was to look at the labor tab here, the description we grabbed from Epicor was remove and replace battery. So it says we're going to take this description and by default we're going to replace the generic electrical labor with the description that we've selected from Epicor. If I wanted to add the two together, so electrical labor, remove and replace battery, I would tell it to append, or if I just wanted it to say electrical labor, then I would use that predefined description. In my case, I like the customer-friendly description of remove and replace battery. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit post/exit. I'm going to do something that's going to be slightly redundant here for just a moment, so bear with me. I told you there was a very subtle difference between the behavior of entering the catalog between these two icons. You can pretty much do anything you'd like by either entry point. The difference is if I click on Smart Jobs and then I go to the category search, well, that takes us to the exact same place as when I just launched out into Smart eCat. It added one quick click to my life, but that's not too bad a deal. We're going to go ahead and look to battery replacement, batteries and cables as I continue on through, much like we did before, getting our responses back from our vendors, both Napa and CarQuest, finding the battery we'd like, changing my category and or changing from parts over to labor, doing a remove and replace battery, and then clicking on next to get to my posted parts and labor tab. The subtle difference between the two is, if you notice on the right hand side where it says labor options, when we came into this window and we had started in Smart eCat, this option was selected by default to replace the predefined description. If you go through Smart Jobs and then switch to a category search, then the first option where it says use predefined description is selected. So if I just hit post and exit at this point, again, you'll notice the difference in the behavior. It says electrical labor. Again, if I go to do a category search by starting out through Smart Jobs, I just have to tell it to use that description we've grabbed from Epicor if that is my preference as we go through. That's really the only difference between the two icons as far as their behavior. The landing point where we end up as we start, obviously different based upon Smart Jobs and or the catalog search. One other job we want to add on, again, we did a pressure test on the cooling system. We need to replace the water pump, the radiator hose, and the thermostat as we go through for this particular transaction. So back up to Smart eCat we go. In this case, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom where I find water pump replacement. And in this case, four different subcategories for parts, still just the one for labor. Let's start with the parts first. So I double click on the item on the right hand side where it says water pump, gasket, fan, and clutch. And as I go through, looking for Napa, I've got a brand new water pump at my local store. We'll check the box on the left hand side, and now I want to switch from one part subcategory to another. So from water pump, we're going to go down to hoses. Again, don't have to click on post. As I go ahead and I change from one part subcategory to another, it drops it into my posted parts and labor tab, my shopping cart, if you will. Looking for the upper and lower radiator hoses, and none available from my friends at Napa. All they want to do is sell me a bunch of coolant. However, if I go down to CarQuest, there it is, my upper and lower radiator hose. We'll grab each one of those. Again, that's second on our list of tasks. Third, we're going to go down to and find that thermostat. So again, I switched my parts subcategory. We'll find that one again at Napa, and now we've got all of the parts that we're looking for as we originally estimate this job for Kathy Parker. I need some labor while we're at it, so I'm going to go down to select. We'll do cooling. As I go through and look through my lists, well, the first thing I get to is, well, we're going to go ahead and remove and replace the radiator hoses. So I'll put check marks in both of those boxes as we go through. Well, we want the thermostat and or outlet. So now another 6/10 of an hour. I apologize. I don't need both and one. I need just both. We're doing 1 hour as the total for the upper and lower radiator hoses. And very least, down at the bottom, we've got our remove and replace water pump, 2.3 hours. And I'll go ahead and hit next on the right-hand side. We've got 4 different parts that we grabbed, the pumps, the hoses, the thermostat. In the labor, we've got 3 different labor lines, the hoses, the thermostat, and the water pump that we'd like to add on. As we look on the right-hand side, our option would be to post the parts and labor to a new job, and again, it's going to replace the predefined description. Here's where we have to make the decision of, are we adding one job for all of this, or are we going to add 3 separate jobs? So one for each. So we're going to do it both ways. We're going to start out by adding one job. When I click on post and exit, now I get the single labor line with a consolidated and or sum total for all of the labor. If I double clicked on that, as I come and look in, there are all of my descriptions for this particular job. Totaled out to be 3.9 hours. Now this becomes important if you're using what we call smart labor pricing. Smart labor pricing will assess the total number of hours and then apply a multiplier at my discretion to the system to determine what the hourly labor rate would be based upon the number of hours. I say that because I'm going to go ahead and take this back off of here. We're going to go through the exact same exercise. If I go back through to I want to start with Smart eJobs. I want to start with the catalog through Smart eCat in the upper left-hand corner. So we'll go to Smart eCat, and we're going to do the exact same thing, just slightly different as we finish, starting with the water pump, gasket, fan, and clutch. So that we can find that water pump, we'll grab the same one from Napa. No reason we shouldn't use it again. We'll click that one there, change our subcategory over to hoses, and again, not from Napa, but from CarQuest, we'll look for those upper and lower radiator hoses. Changing now to our thermostat, gasket, and housing subcategory. And again, we'll grab the one from Napa. Last but not least, let's get some labor. When I go to do some labor, as we did before, we'll grab both for the radiator hoses. We'll scroll down a bit, the thermostat and/or outlet, and then now, last but not least, the water pump. So we arrive at the posted parts and labor tab, the shopping cart, if you will, with the exact same items that we did before. 3 labor jobs, 4 parts, but this time I'm going to tell the system that we're just going to add the individual parts and labor to the invoice. We'll come back and do the post parts and labor to an existing job in just a moment, but we're going to add the individual parts and labor to the invoice. When I click on post/exit, what I end up with is, there's my 4 parts, but there's my 3 individual labor lines. And if I wanted to associate the parts with the labor jobs, all I'll do is I'll just grab the part, I'll drag it, and then once I get it to the job I'm looking to assign it to, I simply let go. We'll do the same with the radiator hoses. So I'm building the individual job totals, and then last but not least, my thermostat. What I had said before was it makes a little bit of a difference in terms of the selling price to the consumer just based upon if I'm using smart pricing or not. We were at $367 and change based upon it was a 3.9 hour total job. Were I to go through each of these individually, that's 1 hour, and then that is 0.6 of an hour, and then the last one is 2.3. So we still get to that same 3.9 hour delta. But again, as it relates to smart labor pricing, if we're looking at a 3.9 hour job versus 3 individual jobs, that's sum total, then smart labor pricing may look and/or price that slightly differently. So it really depends, at least in part, on if you're using smart labor pricing. If you're not, then you won't change the selling price a bit based upon which methodology you use. Then from there, the question becomes, well, how do you want to present it to your consumer? Do you want it to be 3 separate line items with an individual total, or do you want one large total for the entirety of the job? And again, at your discretion, but either one will be ways we can add the job onto this transaction. So we've realized that, you know what, we also need a water pump mounting gasket in order to perform this particular transaction. So I'd like to add that on. I'm going to go back up to Smart eCat in the upper left-hand corner. And as opposed to going through and doing my category search for water pump, figure out which subcategory it belongs to, in this case, I'm going to go up to this box at the top where it says search. I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to type in a search criteria. And I'm going to hit the enter key on the keyboard or click on find on the right-hand side of this. And it says I'm going to look through every labor description in the Epicor catalog, every part description in the Epicor catalog for the consecutive words water pump, and show you all of the different options. So in this case, if I said, well, I'm looking for the water pump gasket, I'll find that in my part listing, double click on it. Once I double click on it, it now does the query, and it says, well, Napa, CarQuest, Advance, O'Reilly, who has one available? In this case, from my suppliers in the sequence in which I prefer, first one I can find that from is our friends at Advance. I'll check the box, and if I'm not looking to add any additional labor for this part, all I do is hit next in the upper right-hand corner, where we now get over to our posted parts and labor tab again, where if I wanted to, I could say, well, I don't want to add a new job. I don't want to just add the part onto the ticket. What I'd like to do is associate that part with the remove and replace water pump job. So I select it from my drop-down, I hit post and exit, then now back over to my ticket, there's my mounting gasket along with the water pump on that ticket for Kathy Parker. So as we're talking about ways to add items onto a ticket, the third way is going to be using that search functionality inside of the Smart eCat catalog. A couple of more examples as far as that's concerned. I'll come back down here to the very bottom. I've got Lisa Bullard. We did a courtesy check and alignment for her, and as we were doing the courtesy check, what we found is that she's got a passenger side window motor that is not either going back up and or down, so we're going to replace that for her. I don't have a smart job for window motors. I don't do them often enough to justify having that. So we're going to go up to the Smart eCat catalog. If I look through my list of categories here, we wouldn't find one that is inherently obvious as to where we're going to find that window motor. So I'm going to come up here to my search window, and I'll type in just the keyword of window. Again, either hit the Enter key on the keyboard or click on Find. It takes me in, and again, here is every part description that contains the word window. So again, if I wanted to go down a little bit, window motor might be the most applicable. We'll start with parts, and we'll come back and get labor here in just a moment. If I go to that window motor piece, as I'm going through, it's doing that same exact search. It's looking for Napa, CarQuest, Advance, O'Reilly to see who might have that available. In our case with CarQuest, I said it was the passenger side. So there's the first one, the front passenger side motor coming from our friends at CarQuest. I check the box, and then now I want to go find the labor. Here's the one example I'll give you where post potentially matters. Meaning, before I go back and do my search again, I either need to hit post and or next, one or the other, before I go and do my search, or else if I just went and now searched and found my labor, then it wouldn't bring that part forward. So if I hit post, find, and then now come over to window motor on the right-hand side, front each 1.1, we'll check the box there, and then now because I'm done picking parts from my catalog, I'll hit next. Now I've got that remanufactured window motor sitting in my shopping cart waiting to get posted back over to my transaction. If I just came up and did find, went to the window motor description on the parts side, checked the box, did find again, it didn't get it, or it wouldn't add it into my shopping cart, my posted parts and labor tab. In this case, other and miscellaneous labor is my labor description. I want to replace it with that predefined description, so when I hit post and exit back over to my transaction, remove and replace window motor front, so there's my parts total, my labor total, $236.49, the subtotal for that job. A couple more examples while we're here. We also noticed through our courtesy check that she needs the turn signal light to be added on and or to be fixed. So I'm going to come back up here to where it says search, and then in this case I'll type in the word signal. And then turn signal light will be my description. And then as we're coming through here, I'll go ahead and query my vendors for pricing and availability. We've got our front turn signal. We'll grab that one there. It's available at my local parts store. And then now again, if I clicked on post, drops it into my shopping cart. I come back and do find, and the only labor they have individualized in the catalog in this case is for the turn signal switch. So I'm not necessarily going to have a labor time from the book. I'm just going to add one on individually. When I come to my posted parts and labor tab, you'll notice post parts and labor to a new job is blank. It's unique or different from what we've done previously. So if I said, well, I'd like to add that in, and I have to at least select a category. So if I said, well, my category is going to be other, then now when I click post and exit, it drops it back onto the ticket. And because all I selected was other, I'm going to come in and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in my description at this point in time, and if there was a labor time associated, I'll enter that as well. So in this case, I just grabbed my part, dropped it back on the ticket, and then I've defined my labor manually by just coming back in as we get back over to our transaction. One last example before I finish with my presentation today. I'm going to go over to my friend Ron Stevens. We're going to replace the right side door mirror on his vehicle. If I go back out to Smart eJobs in this case, and or Smart eCat, because I don't have one available, but if I came up here where it says mirror, in this case we'll use door mirror as our keyword search that we're looking for. As it comes up, it's going to show me that none of my vendors have the part available. So happens certainly as we search for parts a little bit more obscure, but through their common delivery channels, they don't have that particular part available. However, I'd like to build an estimate for it. You notice to the left-hand side, I've got plus keys from CarQuest, Advance, and O'Reilly. No plus key from Napa. In this case, my local Napa has said, not only do I not stock one, but through my standard distribution channels, I don't even have a vendor that I carry. So again, probably a special order, something I'd have to reach out to Napa to see if they could find it for me. And or if I went to CarQuest, CarQuest says, well, we carry the K-Source fit system of OE replacement mirrors. If I'd like to see their part number, back up to that button at the top that says Hide Unavailable. And it shows me, well, here is everyone that they potentially would have available. In this case, I said it was a passenger side mirror. just happened to be the very first one in my list. If you notice out to the right, it says Catalog. If I drop that menu down there, it says, well, I didn't have any availability for it, so I'm not showing you vendor pricing. Stock with NS as the designate indicates to me that this part number and line code does not appear in my master inventory. So I've never carried a 61161F, nor do I ever intend to. It called CarQuest, or it asked CarQuest, do they have it available? And it checked two different locations, both 5904 and 5079. Each of them returned me that the part is not currently in stock. If I wanted to get pricing, however, I can select from that drop-down, and there's that part, $79.99 as my cost, $175.99 selling price to the consumer. Now if I try to check that box and click on Next, now it takes me over to my Posted Parts and Labor tab, so I now have the pricing as if I was going to purchase that part from CarQuest. So even though it's not available, I still have an option to find the part. In this case, I'll click on Find. Let's go back and do the door mirror, 0.5 of an hour, the replacement time. So now when we get and do Next, again, miscellaneous labor, my designate, because I started out through Smart Jobs as opposed to through the Smart eCat icon in the upper left-hand corner, I'll want to check the box that says Replace Predefined Description as I hit Post and Exit. And now we come across to replace the door mirror 0.5 of an hour with the door mirror we've selected from CarQuest. Again, even though CarQuest didn't initially indicate to us that that part was available. So three different options as we're adding jobs onto tickets using Smart eCat. Smart Jobs, the category searches, and or the general search functionality. And again, we can find pretty much anything the Epicor catalog has available to offer through one of those three methods.